This fall, the mayoral election for the town of Louisburg, the rules have been somewhat changed. Normally, we had what is called a plurality form of an election. That means that the winner with the highest vote in the mayoral election wins the election. However, that has been changed via State Bill 183, Session 225-15. And what has happened is that the state legislature has ruled that the town of Louisburg, only the town of Louisburg, will now move from a plurality form of an election to a runoff. Now, what that means, ladies and gentlemen, if there are more than 2 people that are running for mayor in the town of Louisburg, they will be subject to have a runoff election in the month of October, with the 2 highest vote getters in that election will then face off in November. Now, this rule came about in the state legislature and only affect the town of Louisburg. It does not affect Franklinton. It does not affect Bunn, nor does it affect Youngstown. As you may recall, in the last mayoral election in Franklinton, the mayor only won by 1 vote. 1 vote. Why has that changed now for the town of Louisburg? Only affect Louisburg. My question is why? Now, in having changing the rules for the Louisburg election, here's what I think are the major changes for it. This is what will result. It will place an undue fiscal burden on the town of Louisburg. Whether you know it or not, each election, the municipal elections, are paid for by the town of Louisburg. We just had 3 sessions in our budget to approve our budget. We had council members expressing concern about spending. Now, it could cost the town approximately $7,000 to $10,000 to have these 2 elections. That's monies that could be used elsewhere. Specifically, it could be used for infrastructure and other things. So that's an undue financial burden, I believe, is unnecessary as a result of this rule change. There is the risk of voter suppression. Evidence has shown that in 2 elections, in which you have a primary and a runoff, the second election, the data shows that the voter drop-off can be as much as 40 to 60%. And it mostly affects marginal citizens. You know, you get them to vote one time and it's difficult to go back to the polls to vote again. That can be considered a form of voter suppression. It's a matter of opinion. And 3, it places a mandate on the town of Louisburg. This came about with no inquiry or no input from either the citizens or elected officials. Doing my research and doing research from some very good, in my view, investigative reporting, it was determined that nobody knew about this. It happened last Tuesday night, 12 o'clock at night, past Wednesday morning. If this was such a transparent, fair thing, why done in that manner? Why done without input from the citizens? Some may be satisfied and want this. Others may not. I'm one that am opposed to this because it only affects Louisburg. If it had affected Franklinton, Bond, Youngsville, then in my mind it would have been okay. But only Louisburg. So, here's an alternative. By advocating for a return to a single round nonpartisan election or exploring instant runoff voting, which is known as IRV, pilot programs, the town can preserve its electoral integrity while ensuring the majority and support and minimizing fiscal costs. It won't cost us anything. This has been done, this form of electing have been done for years and years and years here in the town of Louisburg. Until now, until this moment, until this election.
Sir, so ask why? Why just us?
That's a question that I don't know the answer, sir. I don't know the answer. So here's what I am proposing. Council, you have before you a resolution that was presented to you. And I'm going to read that resolution for the citizens that will voice our opposition. And I ask council for your strong consideration and your approval of this resolution. The resolution reads, resolution requesting reconsideration of charter amendments mandating runoff mayoral elections. Whereas the General Assembly of North Carolina enacted Session Law 2025-15, House Bill 183. And you can Google that, and that will bring that information right up to you, which amended the charter of the town of Louisburg to mandate a primary and general election, a runoff system, for the election of mayor. And whereas Section 2A and Section 2B of said law amended Section 19 of the town charter, introducing a nonpartisan plurality and potential runoff system previously not required. And whereas the town council of Louisburg believes that this change imposes additional fiscal burdens on the town, risk reduced voter participation in the runoff election, and alters long-standing local electoral traditions without sufficient local input. And whereas empirical evidence from other North Carolina municipalities demonstrate that runoff elections typically experience 40 to 60% voter turnout decline, disproportionately affecting marginalized communities. And whereas the estimated additional cost could be between $7,000 and $10,000 for a runoff election, represents a significant burden on the municipal resources that could otherwise support other community services. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Town Council of Louisburg that the council respectfully urges the General Assembly to repeal or amend Section 2A and 2B or Session Law 2025-15. that the town of Louisburg supports returning to a single nonpartisan election for mayor without the requirements of a runoff, or authorizing instant runoff voting pilot programs for small municipalities. That the town clerk is directed to forward this resolution to the Representative Matthew Winslow, Senator Lisa Barnes, the North Carolina League of Municipalities, and the Office of the Governor. That the council requests the General Assembly consider the fiscal impact on small municipalities and provide either funding mechanisms or alternative election systems that preserve democratic participation while managing costs. This is the resolution that the council that I asked you to vote on tonight and support. I ask this because this is our way, even though this is a law. But it was imposed on us without our input. No one seems to know how it got there, or why it got there, and why only Louisburg. These are questions that you need to ask, or consider, or wonder why it all happened. Why? 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 Thank you, Councilman. Now, at this time, I'd like to make a motion. Hopefully I can get a second. That we move to adopt this resolution. All in favor?
Can we have a discussion?
Yes, that's what I'm gonna ask for the question.
No, a discussion. You're asking us to vote on it without discussing
Yes.
it or making our own comments.
Yes, you will have it, you will have an opportunity to do that. Okay.
We made the motion so we can discuss, we just don't want to take it for it. I'm for it, I would just like to make a couple of comments.
Sure.
That, to clarify, I'm not against, in theory, having a runoff for our mayor's race in particular. As you mentioned, that case in Franklinton where it came down with a single vote, I'm sure that second place runner-up would have liked the ability to press a runoff, and the voters too, but this isn't a traditional runoff structure. This is mandating we must have 2 elections this fall, because it's not just the mayor's race that can be resolved in October. There are 3 council seats in November as well. So regardless of the outcome of that October election, we still have to have a November election. So it's mentioned 7,000 to 10,000. We're already spending that for our normal November election, but this state law is mandating we spend twice as much for 2 elections, no matter the outcome of the mayor's race. And to me, that's irresponsible to put that burden on us, as we talked about in our budget conversations. Every $1,000, $500 counts in our tight budget. That it is an undue burden on us. And then, as Carrie Johnson put it so well, that it's less about the subject matter of this bill versus knowing that the state legislator, without our input or even letting us know until it's already passed, can make these changes to our charter. And that should be deeply concerning to any of you who care about your local government representation. Like, we're not in a home rule state. We can't change that. We are obligated to follow what state and federal law says we can do, but we've operated under an assumption that there's mutual respect. You don't just change things without at least letting us know before you do it.
Mayor, have you reached out to Winslow or Barnes already to ask, were they participants in this bill? Or, I believed it was somebody else that brought this, that has no association with Franklin County whatsoever, which is even more of a red flag, right? Have you reached out to either of them to see if they'd be able to get this through before we're impacted by the election process?
Yes. I talked to Matthew Winslow, and I'll tell you what he told me. Representative Winslow told me that this bill was out there, and it had not become law yet. And I asked him, where did this come from? Where did it originate? Who started this? And who knew about it? Those questions I specifically asked him. His answer, the local GOP. I then asked him, who knew about this? He said he knew about it, and Lisa Barnes knew about it. But nobody else. Nobody else. And as I queried and asked around, I couldn't find out or get any answers as to, where did this originate from? Well, actually, he introduced it, or it started with him, as far as I know. But as this moved through the maze of state legislature, to one bill to another, the way that they do business, and ended up in Representative Clanton's bill, who is a representative of Swain County, North Carolina, Transylvania, North Carolina, which is located way out in the western part of the state. Now, I understand that the way these bills go around, it can float around from one place to another and then end up in somebody's bill, which happened here. That tends me to believe Representative Clanton out in, from Swain County, almost 600 miles, 500 miles from Franklin County. And it gets there. So, these are questions that I ask. Those are mine. Yes.
So he said that if we do this resolution, he can push it through?
No, he did not say that. He did not say that. The purpose of this resolution that I'm asking you to seriously consider tonight would be our answer, our response to all of this, to show that we don't appreciate, I hope we don't appreciate legislature doing things without our input that affects all of us. The next thing we know, we have it. And nobody knows nothing about it, but it's the law. Now we have to go by that law.
Not letting us know the input too, but they don't have to listen to us. But again, if this was a more normal structure where you have the November election, and if the result calls for a runoff, you have one in December, this is forcing us to have a mayoral primary. So we have to have two elections, twice as much money, twice as much coordination before elections. As I said before, that we were not consulted on. Maybe we could have provided that feedback. We consider a December runoff if that's what you call for, but we weren't asked. We were informed after the fact.
Well, it looks to me like someone's trying to stack the deck for the mayoral race. That's my own opinion.
Can I make a few comments?
Of course, go ahead.
I'd like to point out a few things that went on here. I think this is a huge example of how not to run a democracy. This change to our election was done at the last minute. It was attached to a bill to restrict wave surfing in Lake Glenville, wherever the heck that is, without any input from this council or a few all out there. It was done at the request of the local Republican Party. I guess they're having trouble controlling their own house. It only affects the election in Louisburg. As the mayor has pointed out, none of the other municipalities, not in Franklin County or anywhere else in the state, does this apply to. It's just Louisburg. If you want to read the bill, like you said, you can look it up. I've got a copy of it right here. So why just Louisburg? Gentleman asked that. I think the answer is right there. We have the only African-American mayor in Franklin County. It is blatant attempt at voter suppression. As other people on this council have pointed out, we could have sat down and had an intelligent discussion on how to change that if they want to change it. There's lots of places looking at how to do runoffs, because runoffs, as I pointed out, are expensive and they often suppress the vote. A more intelligent way to do it has already been brought up. Another is ranked choice voting. There's other ways to make the election more fair without running up the cost and without suppressing the turnout. So I strongly support this resolution.
Any other comments? We have a motion as well as a second. Ready to vote? I'd like to ask the council. No more discussions? Take the vote. All in favor of this resolution, let it be known by the raising of your hand. All opposed? Resolution passed.